Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the full moon, or Purnima, as it's known as in Sanskrit, that's coming up April 12th, 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology perspective, or Jyotish, as it's known as in Sanskrit. Vedic astrology is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the kind of message or theme for this moment in time is choose your battles. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. So if you're new to Vedic Astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel's all about playlists. I'm pretty good about organizing my videos into different topic areas so that they're easy to find. So like I have a planets, grahas playlist, houses, bhavas playlist, and there are others. Also, I do a lot of analysis of famous birth charts on the channel. And so if you want to look at the birth chart archive list 2024 video, which I'll be updating soon, that has a list of a lot of the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel and the video you can find them in. If you've been following along and maybe missed a few of the teaching videos, the last 3 teaching videos I've posted are Days of the Week or VAR, Trikon, Trinon, Virenchi Yogas or spiritual combinations, and then Libra constellation or Tula Rashi. And if you're new to all this but looking to start somewhere, I would start with this list of videos I've listed on the bottom here, because these will create like these are like the foundational videos I would start with if I was completely new to all this and just trying to get my kind of dip my toe in the water, So, yeah. Okay, so this is the chart for this moment in time of the full moon on 12th of April. This happens to be 20:21 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's New York City time. That's the time zone I live in. So before I get into this talk too much, I mean, it's going to be fairly intense. I'm just letting you know, sort of a trigger warning. Because you can see just off the top here, without knowing anything else about the chart, 8 out of 9 planets are negative houses. Okay, so we've got a lot going on besides that, but that in and of itself will tell you that this is a fairly tough moment in time. Okay, so if you need something lighter and brighter and happier, not that there's not good points in this chart, but I'm just saying overall, even if I was going through it, it was a little bit challenging for me to find the silver lining. There's always a silver lining, but yeah. So anyway, just heads up about that. Okay, so let's see. And then, in addition to 8 out of 9 planets being in negative houses, the day lord is Saturn, and the hora lord or the hour lord is Saturn as well. Okay. So Saturn is a planet that represents delays, obstacles, endings, chronic issues, problems, health issues. Yeah, and Saturn is fairly compromised right now. Saturn's in the 1 degree 41 minutes of Pisces. So basically, it's. I would still consider the Sunday. Sunday is when a planet is in the first, or I usually take 2 degrees at the beginning or end of any constellation because it's a very unstable place. Because the planets like Saturn just crossed into Pisces on March 29th, so not too long ago. And so it's still fairly unstable, although it's starting to get a little bit more stable. So that's going to rattle things a bit for Saturn on its own. The other thing is Saturn happens to be in a part of the sky in a nakshatra called Purva. So if you're not familiar with nakshatras, they're also called lunar mansions. There are about 27 of them. And every night the moon passes through a different one. So after 27 nights, you get what's called a lunar month. Okay, and each of these nakshatras has different energy and symbols associated with them and deities as well. So Purva, the symbol of that is the front legs of a funeral pyre. Okay, so that's going to almost double, triple up, on the symbolism of Saturn, because Saturn symbolizes things like death and destruction and stuff like that. Okay, especially of structures. So especially with the Purva energy there, I mean, we're talking like smoke, flames, cremation, things turning to ash. Okay, and so you can see like this is a fairly intense chart. Okay. And not only is the day lord and our lord Saturn, but if we look at the the dasha period is the current planetary period. These are planets that you can kind of consider them a little bit more active or influential in the chart. So we're running Mars, Saturn, Moon. Okay. So it's like a lot of Saturnian energy. With Mars, you will get action and kind of a fighting energy. And with the moon represents the intuitive mind, the emotional mind. So a lot of, mind, mental, emotional churning, I would say here. Okay. So we've got action, we've got mind, but again, I would also say losses here. Okay. So this is sort of what I'm seeing here is like there's an attempt to um, combat or find some sort of solace or peace or nurturance in the middle of all of this chaos going on, frankly. Okay. The dasha period will shift from Mars, Saturn, Moon to Mars, Saturn, Rahu on June 6, 2025. So with Rahu, you start to get like kind of unusual energy, but also ambitious energy. Okay. So even more so, I think that's gonna, potentially give a boost for like again, if this is a person. The other thing to know about June 6th is you can see in the bottom uh, left corner here, we've got pravraya going on. Those 5 planets, in the 6th house of enemies and daily activities or daily routines. That's as well. That's a life focus. Okay, that's a pravraya yoga is a life focus yoga. And the thing is, when you have all these planets, like Venus owns 2 houses, Saturn owns 2 houses, Mercury owns 2 houses, Sun owns 1 house. That means, like, you can go to the houses they own. Like, Venus actually owns or rules the lugna, the ascendant, the top diamond in the middle there. So it's going to draw that energy to the 6th house. Okay, and then you can do that for all of the houses that all of these planets own. So that means that 7 out of 12 houses, all their energy is going to be going to the 6th house. Okay. So a lot of focus on 6th house matters. 6th house is also acute health issues and acute problems, troubles, accidents, injuries, all kinds of things like that. Okay. So again, it's a negative house. Usually not stuff people are really looking forward to. Okay. But the thing about June 6th is that this pravraya yoga will basically be dissolved by then. Okay. This really kind of all came together in March. We had a couple of eclipses which kind of tipped it off because the eclipse was happening on this Pisces Virgo axis where you see all these planets in the 6th house, but then also the 12th house as well of this particular chart. So it kind of set things off. And then Saturn moved in here on the 29th of March when we had a solar eclipse, and that kind of really pushed things. Okay. The other thing you can see, if you look really closely here, Venus is at 24 minutes. That's also Sunday. That's unstable. Sun's at 141. And Rahu's at 153. So basically, within a few hours or a day, Saturn and Rahu are going to cross. That's going to be like a bit of a blow up, frankly. Um, and you can see Venus, Saturn, Rahu are essentially all within about a degree of each other. Okay. So that's going to compromise all 3 of those planets and all the things they symbolize. So Rahu, unusual, unexpected energy, hidden, kind of bizarre energy, ambitious energy, that sort of thing. Saturn, structure, obstacles, delays, um, antiquity, tradition. Venus is compassion, generosity, social grace, finer things of life, luxury items, traveling, pets, loved ones, spouse, lots of other things. Like fine food and a lot of the niceties of life. So anyway, this gaggle, this tight circle here with the Venus, Rahu, and Saturn, because they're so close together, as you'll see when I go into the Amshar, the subdivisional chart analysis, you'll see these 3 like traveling together a lot of the time because they're basically on top of each other. Okay. And Venus right now is in retrogression. That line under Venus means it's retrograde. You can see Venus pulling back almost to the very beginning of Pisces. In a few days, Venus will go progressive, which sounds good, but the thing is, Venus has to go back over Rahu and Saturn here. So it's going to be in planetary where Saturn, where it's been because Venus just retrograded over Saturn. So a lot of things were really getting pretty tough and intense then. The other thing is Mercury, even though Mercury's a little bit farther out, that's just a recent thing. So in the last few days, Mercury was in the mix of here. So Venus was actually in double planetary war with Saturn and Mercury simultaneously. Basically, all four of these planets were within about a degree and a half of each other in this Purva energy. So Mercury's starting to edge out. It's now in, or will be soon, in Uccha, which is the back legs of a funeral pyre. So that's still chaotic energy, but there's this notion of like being able to take a step back or conscious release or surrendering to all the chaos going on. And Mercury is like the planet representing the rational, logical mind. Okay, so this has been going on for a while. And again, like trying to get a little bit more objective in terms of like, what do we do with all this? Okay. But again, the June 6th time period is that by June 6th, the only planet that will be left in Pisces here is Saturn, because all these other planets will have moved out. Rahu's going to back up into Aquarius because Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon, are always going retrograde. Sun, and you can see Sun is also Sunday here. It's in the last degree of Pisces. So you've got four, pretty unstable planets in this sixth house of, again, acute issues, whether they're health or otherwise, enemies, debts. This can also be pets. Can also be like employees. This can also be like non-biological children. So you can see where the focus is here. Yeah. Okay, so let's just orient to the top of the chart first, and then I'll go into some of the other nakshatras here. So this is the North Indian style chart. That's what I use in my work. And the top diamond in the middle, this is what we call the lugna in Sanskrit. In English, translation is ascendant, first house, or rising sign. Okay. So we have here what we would call a Libra rising chart, because that 7 in the bottom corner refers to not the 7th house, but the 7th zodiac sign, which is Libra, and that's Tula in Sanskrit. So a Tula lugna or a Libra rising chart. Okay, and Libra is ruled by Venus. Okay, which is one of these planets down here in the 6th house, very compromised and sort of in this pile on the funeral pyre here. Unfortunately. Okay, so again, you can tell there's going to be a lot of intense energy here. Yeah. So okay, so the Lugna nakshatra. So the rising sign nakshatra is Swati. Swati is symbolized by new grown grass blowing in the wind. Okay. This tends to be a fairly fragile, it literally symbolizes like fragile beginnings where things are not quite established yet. And I mentioned several times when I see people with, fairly important placements in Swati, they can be like a fairly nervous, even visibly so, sometimes kind of nervous individual. Okay. Because again, they don't seem that grounded or solid, kind of within themselves. Okay. The other thing with Swatis is related to the goddess Saraswati, who is the goddess of art and education. Okay. But yeah, so you can see that just from this, there's some sort of fragile beginning here. Then the moon nakshatra is Chitra. Chitra symbolized by a cut gemstone. So all those cut sides of a diamond or some other precious stone. You can kind of see that there's this energy of value and beauty, but also like structure. Like I tend to think of architecture when I think of Chitra. Okay, and the moon is there, so this is the mind. The thing that was at moon too is also Sunday. You can see it's at 29 degrees 7 minutes in the last house here of the 12th house. And the 12th house is related to losses, expenditures, also foreign places of isolation, and international trade. Okay. And Moon, just to go a little bit here, Moon and Mercury, these are the two mind planets. Moon is more of the emotional, intuitive mind. Mercury is more of the rational, logical mind. But both the Moon and Mercury are in the middle of this, wild, kind of tangled mess here. Okay. And this is all happening again in two negative houses. So the 6th house and the 12th house. Okay. So with the moon and Ketu there, or Mercury and Rahu, are all these kind of, aspecting, because moon and Mercury aspect, directly across from them to the other house. This can be a lot of mental emotional stress and strain, obsession, compulsion, um, illusion, delusion, confusion, all these sorts of things. Okay. And especially when we have all these planets in the sixth house, if this is a person, if this is a person's chart, or we can read this chart either, statically as a birth chart for somebody, theoretical somebody, or we can read it dynamically where it's a transit chart. Okay, so as a transit chart means that, this person is having a very difficult time trying to sort things through and it's causing a lot of stress for them. Probably both mental, emotional stress because of Mercury moon, but also physical stress because Sun is in here and Sun represents general health overall. The other really physical planet is Mars, and Mars is in its debilitation sign in Cancer in the 10th house. So again, not, we have one, two, let me check. 1, 2, 3. I would almost say, I would count Venus, Rahu, Saturn as Sundi, Sun is Sundi, Moon and K2. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets is Sundi. That's a lot of instability besides being on the 6-12 axis. And then Mars is debilitated. So yeah, this is a tough moment. And let me just finish up with the nakshatras here. But so the sun nakshatras in Revati, that's a little bit, uplifting because Revati is more of a gentle, you know, uh, nakshatra that's related to traveling and hospitality. That's pretty nice. The only thing is it's stuck down here in the sixth house, Sundi with all these other, this gaggle of fairly malefic planets. Venus is the only natural benefic. Mercury can be benefic, except that it's with all these other malefic planets. It's probably edging more towards being malefic in the moment. There is a little bit more support because there's what we call parivartana yoga, exchange of houses between Venus and Jupiter. So you can kind of imagine Jupiter in the mix here as well. Okay. So the reason why we have parivartana yoga is Venus is in a sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter's in a sign of Venus, so you can kind of swap them in your mind. So Jupiter is a natural benefic planet, so you can almost think of not just 5 planets in the sixth house here, but 6. And then you've got the energy of Moon coming in here, so that's 7. So the only planets not in the sixth house are K2 and Mars, but you get K2 on the 12th house side. So it's like you have 7 planets in the sixth house and the 12th house, both negative houses. Okay. So the other thing about this, I'll get into more yogas, like I talked about parivartana yoga, which is a specific planetary combination. And again, it is, even though they're both compromised Venus and Jupiter, they are 2 great benefics, so they will bring some positivity to all of this 6-12 house tangled mess stuff. But they are compromised because all these malefics are in Venus. The other thing is Saturn is aspecting Jupiter. And again, Saturn is, quite virulent at this time. Okay. Besides having a parivartana yoga, there's also Shubh kartari yoga around the 7th house because we have Venus, although it's very compromised and probably not doing a whole lot, and Jupiter. Those 2 benefic planets are flanking the 7th house. That gives a Shubh kartari yoga. That gives some boost or protection. Kartari means scissors, so Shubh is a positive, so it's like a positive scissors test. This is like cutting through the obstacles. Okay, so at least there's some protection over the 7th house, and the 7th house represents things like spouse-like partner, independent business partners, but also path in life. Okay. And the dispositor, the ruler of the 7th house, is this debilitated Mars, so there's instability here. What's kind of nice though is that on the 13th of April, so the day after this, Sun is slipping into Aries where it's exalted, which will be nice. Okay, that'll give some energy, a boost of energy and direction, I think, to start moving through all of this stuff that's going on. Okay, so those are kind of more the positive sides of things. Positive sides of things here is that, there's some relief coming, again, if we're looking at this as a transit chart. The other thing to know So again, when we have a chart like this, when we have so many planets in negative houses, and usually when I see 4 or 5 planets in negative houses, that's already indicating to me that this is a precarious moment in time or a precarious chart. We call that when we have 4 or 5 planets or more in negative houses a Balarishta yoga, which means that that's a childhood yoga, which can indicate that when somebody has something like that, 4 or 5 planets in negative houses in their birth chart, that can indicate difficulty in childhood. And it could potentially be so compromised that maybe they don't survive childhood, or maybe they only live into their 20s, which they would end up passing away fairly young. Okay. So, especially with this kind of chart, when we have 8 out of 9 planets in negative houses, and what did I say, 6 planets Sunday, if this was, a birth chart, I would be surprised if this person, lived a long life. Let's put it that way. Okay. Um, this is also, again, if the child was born with this kind of chart, probably have a lot of mental, emotional issues and health issues going on. Okay. Um, yeah. So again, if you wanted, even if you weren't talking about a person, if you were talking about some specific project, this is probably not a moment in time where you would want to start something that you wanted to be have a happy ending with, that was just um, going to survive and survive well and thrive and all of that. Okay, let's just put it that way. So, yeah, that's just what we're starting with. We haven't even gotten into details. Okay. In the context here, just to provide some more astrological and kind of secular context to this moment in time, Saturn, as I mentioned, transited to Pisces 29th of March. That's really kind of what set all of this off. And there's a lot of, world, issues going on, like trade and tariffs and, earthquakes and all sorts of things like that. And again, that's essentially because all of these planets are in the same house, and again, all crunched together, and this pravraya energy. Like, if all these planets are all more towards the Revati side, more towards where the sun is on the other side of Pisces, even if they were all in Pisces but just further along out of pravraya, that would be a whole other type of energy than what we've got going on here. That would bring a lot more grace and hospitality and enjoyment and gentleness, whereas pravraya is just like, you know, turning things to toast, essentially. Okay. So, besides Saturn transiting on March 29th, Saturn's the slowest moving planet. It only changes signs every 2.5 years. Jupiter's transiting to Gemini May 14th, so in about a month from now. And then Rahu and Ketu are transiting a few days after that on May 18th. So, Saturn, Jupiter, Rahu, Ketu are the 4 slowest moving planets. And they kind of create like like they kind of create a new game board for people. Even when one of them transits, it's usually like a pretty big shift for people, especially if they're running that planet. Um, but when you have all 4 or 4 out of 9 of the classic planets shifting signs, and again, Saturn shifts every 2.5 years, Jupiter shifts every year, and Rahu and Ketu shift every year and a half. So basically, when these 4 planets are shifting, that's going to set up a new kind of life structure for the next 1 to 3 years. You can kind of see it that way. Okay. So on this day also, and kind of the more social calendar stuff, this is Hanuman Jayanti. Hanuman was a great devotee. Some people just know him as like sort of the monkey god in Hinduism or whatever, but he's considered to be sort of a superhero. So he's got great powers to help and uplift and that sort of thing. We also have Passover going on about this time. So again, that's about liberation, but also like protection from harm. And Good Friday's going on, so there's like this kind of resurrection energy. And then there's also Vaisakhi, so that's mm, Sikh tradition is like Solar New Year that they celebrate. So again, there's a lot of like um, intense energies with these sort of holidays. And again, it's a lot about like sort of surviving really dire circumstances or coming back to life or starting new cycles, that sort of thing. And so, again, luckily, just having Sun switch into Aries within 24 hours of this moment in time, this might seem like a very dire moment. And it clearly is. I mean, it's not like it just seems. It is a dire moment, but there is some sort of new, fresh, enlivening energy coming very shortly after this. Not to say that this is all done and over with, but at least there's that going on. So, positive direction. So let's go through house by house and see what we see. Lugna, again, this is a Libra Tula rising chart. This is a movable air sign or Charavayu. So there's going to be a lot of mental churning and thoughts going on for this person or moment in time. And then the Lugna here is aspected by a debilitated and Digbala. Digbala is directional strength, Mars. So we have an exaggerated condition, Mars. Mars, again, is an action planet, rebellious planet. So being debilitated is going to be more kind of impulsive, erratic, which is already kind of a quality of it. But there's some strength here because it is directional strength. And then the other thing is Mars is in the nakshatra of Pushya, which is actually nice because a lot of these other nakshatras are not so gentle here. But Pushya is symbolized by the udder of a cow. So that's all about creating like nurturance and emotional, physical stability. So even though Mars is debilitated in the 10th house of like daily action, like this might be somebody who's, trying, like maybe it's two steps forward, one step back, like they're trying to create some sort of stability, like mental, emotional nurturance or stability. Maybe they're not fully able to because it's like a kind of impulsive two steps forward, one step back type energy, or they may not be getting full traction on this, or things are so slippery or so kind of chaotic right now. It's hard to do anything in a consistent way. At least there's some attempt here. Okay. So just from these sorts of energies coming into the lugna, the top of the chart, so stabilize something very new or fragile, right? Pulling in that Swati energy. This could be anger, irritation, inflammation. Probably not. At least again because Mars is a fire planet. But again, luckily Mars is in the Pushya, so it's going to be a little bit more gentle than because Mars can be really like I mean when it gets really not just debilitated but compromised by other malefics, it can be quite violent or destructive. So at least the edge seems to be taken off of Mars, which is good because there's so much else going on in the chart. It's like, yeah, at least that's going on. But there can be some anger, irritation, just like frustration going on with this. And so because there's so much frustration and stress, mental, emotional, physical stress even, like it looks like there's some attempt to find something that will help, and kind of calm things down. This could be like many erratic thoughts and actions. Again, like slipping, like the wheels are slipping rather than getting a grip and creating traction. Could be a little bit of rebellious or pioneering energy here. Um, yeah, so the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for the chart, as I mentioned, is Venus. It's an exaggerated condition as well. It's exalted, but it's Sunday and it's in planetary war, graha yuddha. And I would say, two or even three times over because it just came out of a double war with Saturn and Mercury. And then once it goes progressive and starts going towards Rahu and Saturn again, it's going to be in planetary war with Saturn again. So just this month, and Saturn in planetary war twice, and then Venus and Mercury twice. So again, whenever you have planets in planetary war, they both get beaten up, even though there's like a winner and a loser. I mean, they both get beaten up, and then the houses that they own both get beaten up. So basically, between Venus, Saturn, and Mercury, just that's like six, they both own two houses. 6 out of 12 houses have really just, had it, the last month or so. Okay, so, and then the thing is, again, Venus is not very stable, it's exaggerated. And then you've got 4 malefics on it. The 2 other Sunday planets, Rahu, Saturn. These are all in Purvapatra, but I've been talking about the funeral pyre. You've got and then Mercury's also exaggerated. It's debilitated, but it's Nichabanga, meaning it's with planet Venus that's exalted in the same sign. So that brings it up a little bit. Mercury at least has moved on to Uttar Bhadrapada, where there's a little bit more, again, objectivity or distance from, being in the middle of the storm. And then we have not just a Sundhi sun, but a Gandanta sun. So there are three spots in the chart where planet can be not just Sundhi, but Gandanta, where we're moving from a water sign to a fire sign. And so that's actually doubly unstable because you're not just crossing constellations, but you're crossing nakshatras. So it's doubly unstable. So again, even like there's not enough instability, even more instability here. Yeah. But again, luckily, Sun is transiting into its exaltation sign of Aries within 24 hours, so that'll help. The sixth house is an artistan. It's about material wealth. So again, there can be all of this concern and energy going on in the sixth house is usually, typically about material things. So material things can be like wealth, like money or possessions, but even things like, people, um, friends and family. I mean, I guess it's sort of funny to think about that, but those sorts of things are what are being kind of, challenged right now. And again, this is the house of acute issues, enemies. The sixth house is also digestive issues, especially midgut, routines, debt, employees, pets, non-biological children, pravraya. Okay, so I talked about some of these yogas, the pravraya yoga, I talked about all three of them. Pravraya, parivartana, balarisha yoga. So again, Jupiter, parivartana is going to bring Jupiter into the mix. So many planets in negative houses, that's going to compromise the whole chart, make it weaker. But there's this focus, there's some attempt here to try to ameliorate the situation. Okay. And then Jupiter is in a nakshatra, Mrigashirsha. It has been in Rohini for a long time. Rohini is a nakshatra that's indicates like, lovely, nourishing, attractive, seductive, um, fertile energy. And now we're moving to Mrigashirsha. So we're losing that groundedness and that stability. And Mrigashirsha is the symbol of Mrigashirsha is a deer's head. So you can think about a deer wandering through the forest. And again, deers are also sensitive, kind of like the Swati energy, right? Their ears are always twitching, and sometimes with like a little sound, they just start bouncing away. But traditionally in many cultures, like deer going through the forest is all about seeking and searching and trying to find. Again, I think that the Jupiter and Mrigashirsha is adding on to this sort of debilitated Mars of like trying to find some grounding or solidity or nurturance or whatever in the mix of all of this chaos going on. So there's at least some attempt in that direction. So the thing is, because all of these energies between Venus, Saturn, Mercury, Sun, and you can again consider Jupiter in the sixth house, and again, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter own two houses. Sun is another one. That's 9 out of 12 houses. It's like six houses is a big sink where all of the other houses are kind of, draining into there. So there's a lot going on. I mean, and the other thing is this is a dual water sign. So that also indicates like mixed emotions, but then there's a duality. So it's not just like one storyline going on, but at least two and probably multiple because again, all these planets are in the sixth house. So that's why I believe the kind of, maybe greater message, from this moment in time is like choose your battles. Because there's got to be, some sort of, prioritization or even like I keep thinking triage. And this chart seems very medical to me. I don't usually go too medical, but it seemed very medical to me because again, sixth house is acute medical issues. 12th house because there's also a lot of connection to the 12th house here, or sorry, the eighth house here, and that's like long-term chronic health issues. And then the 12th house is like losses and expenditures. Like it's hard not to see this as a pretty strong medical chart, especially we got the Balarisha yoga, so potentially children who have a very difficult time early on in life, maybe not even surviving type energy. Yeah, so the sixth house, since Venus, the Lugnatia, again, ruling planet for the chart, is there, we keep going back to the sixth house. So what could that be? Again, multiple battles, pain, because we have Saturn, Mercury, Sun. Saturn represents neuromuscular junction, Mercury represents peripheral nerves, Sun represents the spine, central nervous system. And then the other thing, Rahu and Saturn are Vata planets. So Vata, you can translate that loosely as wind. That comes from traditional Indian medicine or Ayurveda. So there's a lot of air energy here. And Venus is also a Vata Kapha planet, and Mercury is a tridoshic planet. Sun is the only kind of heat-giving, which may balance actually all this wind. But this could be like cramping. This could be pain. This could be paralysis going on here in the sixth house. And not just of the sixth house, which is again the midgut area, but for the whole chart and the whole person, because Venus is here. And Venus is a ruling planet. So it's bringing that first house energy of the whole physique, the whole physicality of somebody and the whole psychology of somebody, and then dragging it into this big mixed, mess in the sixth house. So it's more than just a tummy ache here that we've got going on. This could also be an infection because Rahu can indicate things like viral infections, possibly. This could be, again, I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, mental, physical, emotional turmoil overall, disrupted neuromuscular system. This could also be potentially anesthesia. So, because, all of the planets, all these planets in the sixth house are bringing energy from the other houses into the sixth house. Um, what I was seeing was that there could be some sort of accident happened, or acute problem that happened, um, involving like a car accident potentially, because Venus represents vehicles, and not just car, but like any kind of vehicle. Like we just saw in the news yesterday or this morning, some helicopter crashed in the river next to New York City. Some tourists, unfortunately, passed that way. And earlier on, when Venus was in this part of the sky, when Venus had just crossed from Aquarius to Jupiter, there was like that, there were a few plane crashes that went on, but the one that was sort of like a little bit even more unusual was there were a bunch of gymnasts on the plane. That happened like about a month ago when Venus kind of was in that spot, the same spot, um, which is kind of a bizarre thing to have a plane full of gymnasts, but I guess they had all been in a conference or competition or something like that. Um, so yeah, a lot of artists, and Venus represents art as well. So a lot of loss. And let's see. This could also be something that involves OB, obstetrics and gynecology. And the reason why is Venus represents the sexual system. It doesn't have to be just about women. I mean, this could be about men as well, but the sexual system, Venus represents that. And Jupiter represents children. So because Venus is in the sixth house and Jupiter's in the eighth house, and then they're in parivartana, you get Venus and Jupiter in both the sixth house and eighth house of both acute issues and chronic issues, like medical issues. The other thing is that Saturn owns both the fourth house of mother and the fifth house of children. And Saturn is, um, the lord of the fifth house of children has gone to the sixth house. So this could be like acute problems with children. But the other thing is that when you have Venus and Saturn and Rahu, like it is, because Saturn represents the fourth house of not only mother, but property and vehicles, this could be damage to a vehicle, and loss of children, potentially, or at least compromise of children. The other thing this could represent, again, this might be getting intense and heavy for people. So, if you need to check out or come back later or whatever, I get it. But the other thing this could potentially be is this could be like a loss of a child, maybe through childbirth. Also, the mother could be compromised as well. Um, Very, very difficult childbirth. If the child and mother survive, this could also be like a miscarriage. This could also be something like an ectopic pregnancy. Um, Yeah, especially because like you're running Mars and Saturn. Saturn owns the fifth house of children, and Mars is aspecting there. So it's like Mars is trying to do things to nurture children, but then Saturn is falling off into this sixth house, mess here. So there's some scrambling, going on here to maybe save a child or, whether full grown or newly born. But there's a lot of difficulty going on here. Okay, and there could be as a result of like potentially an accident, like maybe the child's in a car accident, or again, maybe it's like through childbirth or something like that, or maybe they don't even get to childbirth. Like maybe again, it's like a miscarriage or something like that. There's some attempt to ameliorate the situation, but the attempts are kind of scattered a bit, and it may not be fully helpful in ameliorating the situation. There may be both short and long term effects here because, again, you have that parivartana with Venus and Jupiter, right? Jupiter is the lord of the sixth house, but it's gone to the eighth, and the eighth house lord has gone to the sixth. So there's a overlap here of both acute and chronic issues. Even though you see your eye goes to all the sixth house stuff of acute issues, there's going to be long term consequences here as well. Okay. Yeah, potential loss of children. What did I write? Ectopic pregnancy. Oh, so this is, again, this sun going into Aries. Again, this might be a little bit of a bright spot. Well, let me back up a little bit before I forget the thought. So Mars aspecting in this fifth house. Again, Mars is in Pushya, but it's debilitated, so Mars can only do so much. Mars can represent things like surgery or chemistry. So it could be like drugs, medicine, more conventional Western medicine type stuff. And the fifth house not only represents children, but it represents counseling. So there might be some sort of um, medical consult or surgical consult going on here to see what may be done to help the situation. Like, again, if somebody was in an accident or if there's something going on with childbirth. Um, and then in addition to that, Sun, once it moves into Aries in the next 24 hours, it's not only going to be in Aries, but it's going to be in Ashwini nakshatra. And Ashwini is symbolized by the Kumara twins, which are the celestial healers. And there's this kind of rescuing energy because they like ride horses and stuff. So it's like somebody riding to the rescue. And Sun exalted here, Sun as a planet can represent as a profession like medicine because Sun also represents general health. So it may be that, at this moment in time, it's like, is there anything that can be done? Like it's a pretty dire situation. But once Sun moves into Aries, it may literally be like a doctor or some kind of healthcare person who shows up who can actually help in some way. To what extent, again, it's depends. And, we're not running Sun here, but it's still going to be better for Sun to be in Aries than in the middle of all this mix here in the sixth house. Okay. So it could literally be a doctor. With Sun and Ashwini, I would think a doctor first thing. Sun can also represent other things too, like it can represent organization, authority. Some other authority can represent father. So the other thing that's interesting, the other reason why childbirth kept coming to mind is because when Sun moves into Aries, Sun represents father. That's like the partner, spouse, because seventh house represents spouse or partner, becomes a father, literally, maybe, or at least maybe they become boss, because Sun can represent like president or authority. But then Moon is also fast moving, so Moon is also within a few hours going to be in the Lugna, and Moon represents mother. So it's like the Lugna person, the person represented by the Lugna rising sign is going to have Moon or mother energy, and then their partner is going to have the father energy. So it's almost like a couple becoming parents. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. So also when Sun moves into Aries, pretty shortly here, there's going to be some new strength as leader. The Sun also represents like leadership, clarity, passion, moving forward in a new path or cycle. Yeah. Um, then the chidra grahas, these are planets of vulnerability. So Mars again could, and literally chidra grahas can be not just like these are usually sensitive spots or kind of Achilles heels of people or whatever. But it can literally be like sites of surgery. So, yeah, again, that could be a vulnerable thing. And then we have Jupiter twice. So again, we're picking up potentially children energy again. And then Mercury. So this could be decisions. Mercury is the analytical, logical mind, like sorting through the stuff. Mars and Jupiter potentially could also be legal things as well. So that could be an issue. Then we have information about the yogi, aviyogi, duplicate yogi. So the yogi is a planet representing wealth, and that's the sun, which again will be very strong very soon, which is nice because if we move away from, again, I kept getting caught up in all the medical stuff here, but with this Mars, since we're running Mars Mahadasha, planetary period, this could also be somebody who's like looking for a job or starting a new job or something like that. And so with Sun moving into its exaltation sign and also being the yogi indicating wealth, this could be that there's money involved in moving forward and or independent business once Sun moves into uh, the seventh house here, into Aries. But then we have the Avi duplicate yogi Saturn. So Avi yogi is a planet indicating lack of wealth, and duplicate indicates wealth. So we have a mixed bag here with Saturn. So again, this could be Saturn can also indicate things like worry, anxiety, depression, skepticism, doubt, and Saturn is all over, again, the Mercury here and Moon, Venus and Jupiter. So Saturn's really dragging things down because Saturn keeps coming up. You can see in various ways. The Shiva Kartari yoga, again, the good scissors yoga I mentioned over the seventh house, that's going to protect the seventh house. So it looks like seventh house stuff for Libra, this Libra person here is going to open up, almost overnight. Um, there weren't a lot of other yogas here. There's a DKA yoga, although its compromise is not very strong. A DKA is a um, Dharma Karma Adipati yoga. That's a combination of Kendra, so Kendra planets, which are planets that own houses in the middle here, the four houses in the middle, and or the three houses, the trinal houses, 1, 5, or 9. And sometimes when you get a combination of those, which you do have here in the sixth house, but the thing is, it's not very strong because all these planets are Sundi and in war and all this kind of stuff. So I don't think these DKA yogas are going to give very much, but at least they're there, better than nothing, I guess. Then, so even though their yogas here, most of them are weak, and because, like the yogas, like the Balarishta yoga is considered to be a fairly negative yoga. It's going to give into more that way of the yogas. Also, the dasha lords, like Mars is the dasha planets. Mars is debilitated, and Saturn is Sundi and in war, and Moon is Sundi on the Rahu Ketu axis with all these negative or malefic planets on it. Like, unfortunately, because all these planets are so compromised, you're going to get more of the negative repercussions of the yogas. There are very few yogas, but you're going to get more of the negative side of things. There's going to be less protection, even though there's some protection. Um, yeah. So what else did I write? But again, once Sun and Moon shift, that'll bring clarity, more clarity of intuition and path forward. It looks like there's like a rescue operation pending here. But again, if we're talking about this as a person, this is somebody who's always going to be in trouble of some kind or another. If this was a child, at least they're running Mars, so at least, they're born into Mars Mahadasha period. So it's going to be touch and go because Mars is debilitated, but at least it's out of the mix of this 6-12 axis stuff. But then after Mars is Rahu. So, then whenever they move into the Rahu period, things are probably going to get tougher for them. So if this was a child that was born, maybe the first few years of life were actually a little bit better. Because then after Rahu, there's Jupiter, and after Jupiter, there's Saturn, Mercury, um, and then K2 Venus. So this might be a child who survives childbirth, but then because Mars is a short period, I think it's what 6 years, 7 years. So at most, well, where are we at? Mars, Saturn, Saturn. This might be a child that survives the first 5 or so years of life. And then things, even if they have health problems, it might actually get worse after that. So, yeah. So, anyway, that's the gist of the chart. Let me just go through the other houses, see what we see. So, the second house lord is Mars. So, again, some, erratic energy there. It's aspected by Venus and Jupiter. So there's going to be, the second house is like family and assets and speech. There's going to be a roller coaster here. Because Mars is debilitated, the owner of the owner of the house, and then Venus and Jupiter are compromised. Venus for various reasons, but they're both compromised because Saturn's on both of them. So again, a bit of a roller coaster for the family of this and close to people to this person, if it was a person. The third house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Saturn. Again, Jupiter's gone to the eighth house. And the third house represents things like siblings and neighbors. There's going to be issues here, and possibly endings with siblings and neighbors and that sort of thing. So again, if this is a person's chart, and since I mentioned OB-GYN stuff, usually I just posted actually the Libra constellation video, and Libra people generally are not super, like into kids. Their charts, they don't often have, if they have children, they may not have children, but if they have children, they don't tend to have many. This chart might be a little bit different, because, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about more in a little bit, but this might be somebody who's trying to get pregnant, and it's very hard at the current time. Or they may chronically have problems, especially because Venus is so compromised. Again, that could be the sexual system, and Saturn and Rahu are on top of it. This could be like unusual structures in the sexual system, whether this is like a man or a woman. And that may be why, it's hard to maintain a child. So whether it's like the uterus or the ovaries or the sperm or the whatever, that may be why it's hard to have a kid. Um, if that's the story that's going on here. And then the third house, this could be siblings. So this could be like, because Saturn is on the third house, this could be maybe, unfortunately, like maybe a sibling that's passed. Because the other thing is that Saturn represents, or Saturn is lord of the fourth house, and the fourth house can indicate genetic issues. And so Saturn is so compromised and it's gone to the sixth house. Here it could be genetic reasons why somebody's, there's like maybe a fertility problem here. Okay, what else? Fourth house lord is Saturn. It's aspected by an exalted Mars, a debilitated Jupiter, K2, and Uccha Falguni. So this can be loss of destruction of home. Those are things that's what the fourth house can represent. Property, family, mother, especially vehicles, as I mentioned, happiness in general. This could also be legal issues related to these things. So yeah, again, with Saturn being the lord of the fourth house of happiness and it going to the sixth house, again, there's more mental, emotional stress here. Again, even though there's some attempt by Mars to, bring this up. And then, but K2, with Mars and K2, this will bring an explosive energy to fourth house stuff. So again, if unfortunately, like maybe a child has had an accident or maybe passed or something like this is some attempt to try to uplift this person, yeah. Got, yeah, so same stuff on the left, on the right, notes on the other house. So the fifth house lord is again the Saturn again. It's aspected by Mars and Pushya. So again, this could be like emotional counseling after loss of a child. And again, I kept thinking car accident for some reason, but it could be like a childbirth thing as well. The fifth house also represents creativity, not just children and advisors. Again, I mentioned this could be a surgical consult if this was a medical issue, a medical situation. But there's also going to be some, I think, duality of mind because Saturn is dropped down in the sixth house um, you know, of Pisces, which is a dual water sign. So this may be somebody who has a hard time being clear about what they want. It's a bit erratic, the fifth house, because the fifth house can also represent intellect here. So this may be somebody who has a hard time deciding. And also, as a generally for Libras, because their fifth house of intellect is a fixed air sign of Aquarius, and their eighth house of deep psychology is a fixed earth sign of Taurus, they typically don't change their minds that much, or they're hard to influence. I mentioned in my Libra video, Jupiter is the lord of the third and the sixth house for Libras. And Jupiter is the planet representing like wise counsel and even spiritual counseling and stuff like that. So a lot of Libras, they can be fairly rebellious and not always listen to wise advice. But what I'm seeing here is that, this Mars is kind of a little bit of a crack in the fifth house. And, the eighth house as well. We've got K2 aspecting there and Saturn. This could be somebody who is changing their mind after, unfortunately, some sort of incident or tragedy, even. Like, this could be with all this energy in the sixth house, and I mentioned non-biological children. This could be somebody who maybe they've tried getting pregnant several times and it hasn't worked out biologically. So now they're considering other options like maybe surrogacy or adoption or something like that. Because the other thing, and I was going to wait until we got to those houses, well, we're sort of there because we're in the fifth house. The thing is, once again, Saturn has just transited March 29th, Jupiter's transiting March 14th, and then Rahu and Ketu are transiting May 8th, 18th. Rahu's going to go, into the fifth house of children. And Rahu is a planet that can represent ambition and drive and even like obsessive energy. And then Jupiter is going to go into, what is it, the ninth house here. And the ninth house is the fifth from the fifth. So this can represent, again, children in a way, but Jupiter is going to be aspecting the fifth. So you're going to have Rahu and Jupiterian energy in the fifth house for at least a year, because Jupiter is going to be in Gemini for a year, and Rahu is going to be there for in the fifth house for a year and a half. When Rahu goes in the fifth house and Jupiter goes in the ninth house, aspecting the fifth, this could be somebody who becomes kind of, quote unquote, baby crazy. And I don't mean that in any derogatory type of way. I actually I'm a physician. I've worked with women who are looking to, work with their fertility issues if they've had trouble conceiving or, maintaining pregnancy. I also tried, and that's what kept coming to mind was like I taught prenatal yoga for a number of years. I've been a yoga teacher for over 20, and for a number of years I was doing prenatal yoga. Um, and so, and it was kind of funny how that even developed. I was teaching just, sort of regular adult classes, and um, a lot of my yoga students were getting pregnant. Like quite a few, like noticeably quite a few. And I didn't realize several of them didn't mention to me that they were trying to get pregnant for a long time and hadn't been able to. And for some reason, they felt like my class, and again, they never announced this to me beforehand. They only told me after they got pregnant. They felt like my yoga class helped them. One person said they felt like it physically helped them, like even like opening up their hips and their pelvis because they had kind of narrow hips and stuff. And another person said it helped them mentally and emotionally. And whenever I did teach prenatal yoga, I was always talking about how it's really important, when you're trying to conceive or maintain a pregnancy to create a nest, a really stable nest in your life and in your body so that, that soul feels like it's going to be a safe place, to sort of develop, as it's growing in utero. So, yeah, even this like Mars aspecting this Mars and Pushya aspecting the fifth house, this could be like advice, because again, the fifth house is advice. This could be advice to do some gentle yoga, whether this is related to conceiving or maintaining a pregnancy, childbirth, or like some other, maybe some kind of accident or injury or whatever, you know, gentle yoga might be, what's suggested here to help deal with either physical issues or mental emotional issues going on with whatever the situation. But again, getting back here, again, if this was a person's chart, it looks like, you know, even if this was a typical sort of stereotypical Libra who's not so interested, focused on having children, let's say, um, they may go through a phase that kind of throws them off because they're like, normally I don't really think about kids or whatever, but the next year and a half, maybe that's, they get kind of obsessed, weirdly obsessed with it. It could be going on as well. Yeah, so and again the baby crazy again, sometimes it just, especially whenever we have Jupiter aspecting or in the fifth house, that just naturally tends to kick up that kind of energy. Even if people are older, and they're past, what they consider to be childbearing years or whatever, maybe they end up getting really into like teaching, or they want to be around kids or maybe their grandkids or whatever, because the ninth house also represents grandchildren. So maybe it's not just um like the parents directly, but this could be like a grandparent of somebody who's having issues, not just the parent. That could be. So, okay, then the sixth house here, we've been talking about a lot. The Lord is Jupiter aspecting its own house, retrograde, exaggerated Venus, Rahu, Saturn, Purva Bhadrapada, the exaggerated Mercury, Gandanta Sun. We talked. So again, mixed emotions, pain, paralysis, trying to find some sort of routine after through upheaval. This could also be a momentary respite because Venus, this specific moment, Venus and Saturn are not in war. They just got out of war. They're going back into war. So this might be like, again, just a minute to kind of catch your breath before some final push, forward. And again, there's some movement towards gaining objectivity or surrendering to all of this chaos here. In the seventh house, again, the Lord is Mars. It's debilitated. Sun is entering there. That should be helpful. Again, this could be some sort of authority or doctor rescuing the moment. Light and motivation on the pioneering path ahead. Um, strength to spouse, business partners, or independent business, or even starting one potentially. Um, starting a new relationship could be. Although, with Venus being so compromised, probably not the best time for it. But yeah, because Venus is the planet bhava karaka. It's the symbol of the house, the planet symbolizing the house, because Venus represents the spouse-like partner. So there's still issues here, even when Sun moves into Aries. Let's just put it that way. Brings some energy. Also, Sun, that's going to bring energy. So it's going to send some of that energy into the Lugna. That's going to be nice. Even though Sun is debilitated in Libra, still should be better than feeling so much sort of fatigue and languishing. Leadership here, some protection from kartari, but that yoga, but again, it's compromised because of all these malefic planets and Sunday planets and all this jazz going on. Eighth house Lord is Venus, aspect of zone, and we've got Jupiter, Saturn, K2 energy here. So it's a grounded, practical mind seeking balance. There's some optimism here, but I would say it's shaky because, again, the Lord of the eighth house is this compromised Venus. And then we've got a K2 aspecting here, Saturn aspecting here. So, yeah, it's still shaky. This could also be like, a release of what's no longer working, because there's so much going on here. It's like you can't keep up with all of it. So then again, it's like, choose your battles. What's worth fighting for, and what do you just let go of and like release, release yourself from. This could also be shifting mind and mood. So, like an mental emotional roller coaster. Because again, the Venus and Jupiter in the eighth house will bring optimism, generosity, but then Saturn and Ketu will be like, and socializing. But Saturn and Ketu will bring like distance and isolation. Um, So depending on what planet you're running, it's like which, on what particular day, is this person going to be up or down mentally, emotionally. Then the ninth house lord is Mercury. That Mercury again is in the middle of all this sixth house stuff. And the ninth house represents authority, government, father, guru, satsang. So spiritual community. This could be like recovering from involvement in the situation. What's going on? Like maybe this person is not feeling very supported. Maybe these other folks, because again, Saturn is lord of the fourth house of moms, Mercury's the lord of the ninth house of it's father, Jupiter is the lord of the third house of siblings. It may feel like, very isolating to this person. It may not feel like they're getting a lot of help, and maybe these people are making things worse, frankly, because they're all in the sixth house, or maybe they're trying to help, but it's not getting very far. 10th house lord is a Sunday moon gone to the 12th house. So again, that's going to bring instability to the 10th house of daily work and activities, and debilitates Mars, aspected by Jupiter. So seeking stable work or daily activities here, sorting through mental, emotional, legal stress issues, loss, but again, there might be kind of a grasping at straws, not getting traction. This could also be like if somebody's looking for a new job or moving, this could be like property, like real estate type stuff, property management type stuff. Um, because again, the lord of the 11th house of income is a sun, and sun has gone to, again, the sixth house here. So it could be income's compromised. And then, so it might be somebody's looking to move into some sort of, property management or real estate type work. Maybe this Mars and exalted in the fourth house of education. This could be, maybe somebody getting their real estate license or, excuse me, something like that. You know, yeah. So the 11th house lord is Sun. So again, luckily, again, Sun's going to be exalted pretty soon. So this might be some new opportunity of income. Also, 11th house is coworkers or social venue. That's why I was thinking like maybe real estate could be, yeah, could be in line for some new job or side hustle or something like that. Although it looks like it's more of a, well, it could be both. It could be, both yeah, because Mars is in the 10th house and it's also in it's the lord of the 7th house. So it could be both. Maybe the side hustle is actually getting a little bit of traction, or support once Sun moves into Aries. And the 12th house lord is Mercury. It does aspect its own sign. That'll bring some strength, protection. And then you have all these other planets on the 12th house. So there's some sort of realistic, again, sorting through issues. This might be also like a mental health retreat, like literally stepping back from all this stuff going on, trying to get some grounding and centered energy going on. And then again, once Moon shifts into Libra very shortly in a few hours, there's going to be an increase in intuition and kind of like mothering energy. And even if this isn't like a woman, it's like a nurturing type energy. Yeah, so that's the main chart, and then I went into the subcharts. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so now I was going to get into the subzodiacs, also known as the amshas or subdivisional charts. So again, if you're not familiar, these charts are used to give more kind of nuanced information that you to the natal chart, the main chart. But these are mostly used for timing. And always, usually these aren't analyzed, independently. You always want to take what you learned from the amshas and bring it back to the natal chart, integrated together. So I put at the top here of the slide, the dasha here, just to remind us of which planets are active or more active. So we have Mars, Saturn, the Moon, and then it's moving to Mars, Saturn, Rahu, June 6th. So I circled those planets just so we can, again, really focus in on them. And then I started here with the health amshas, since again, it just seemed like there were so many potential health medical things going on in the chart. Um, so at the top, we have the Tajik Shashdamsha D6 for acute issues. In the middle, the Tajik Ashtamamsha D8 for chronic issues, and the Bamsha D27 for strength and resilience. So uh, in the top chart, all the grahas are well placed, they're all in positive houses. That's, usually helpful. However, you can see this, like, again, this gaggle of planets in the fifth house. Okay, so very similar because you have Venus, K2, Saturn, Rahu, Mercury, Mars, very similar. And then Jupiter's aspecting there. So you have 7 out of 9 planets essentially in the fifth house of, again, children. The fifth house is also upper GI, possibly heart issues, that sort of thing. So that's why, again, like, just this is just kind of, again, reinforcing what's showing up in the main chart, is that there could be a hyper focus on children. And again, most of these, well, let me see. So the other thing to note is that, M- Mars is a soul enemy of Mercury. That's going to bring, through fighting energy. Jupiter's a soul enemy of Venus, and Venus is a soul energy of rock. This is not a, and most of these, again, even though Venus and Jupiter are benefics and they're the advisor planets, you can see there's a lot of confusion and chaos and fighting going on here, and disruption going on here in fifth house matter. So again, children and advice. Okay. Um, yeah, and a lot of energy going to that area. And again, it's essentially the other thing is that you're essentially recreating like the energy that will happen once Rahu transits into the fifth house, like in the main chart I mentioned, and then Jupiter's going to be in the ninth house, aspect in the fifth house, which could again create this sort of baby fever, baby crazy type energy. So again, it looks like that's a big deal. Um, yeah. So the other thing is that again, because Venus, just notice as we go through these options, since Venus, Saturn, and Rahu are basically in the same degree, they're going to travel together. So we're going to keep coming up against the unusual structures, and unusual delays with Venusian type issues. So okay, so the middle chart here, chronic issues, Saturn and Rahu are now well placed. And it's also in a pop Samkhya yoga with Mars, so that's going to bring more negative energy. And this is in the third house of changes and endings. So, and you can see that Mars is in the fifth house in the first chart, and then Mars is aspecting the fifth house in the second chart. And in the third chart here, Mars is aspecting the fifth house. So again, Mars can indicate accidents or infections, inflammation. Um, and we're getting all 3 times in the fifth house of children. So, and Mars can also represent like bleeding and that sort of thing. So, it just seemed like with all 3 amshas, I haven't gone through the third one entirely, but just you can see how these health amshas are essentially reinforcing what I saw in the main chart. So the Bamsha D27, strength and resilience, you can see 3 of the 4 planets are not well placed. So, very, that's why we have that Swati probably in the Lugna of like, very fragile beginning here. Luckily, in some ways, Saturn is Saturn is Swa and Rahu is Swa in the 8th house. And Moon is in the 3rd house. So Moon, Saturn, and Rahu, it's like that's going to bring changes and endings. Saturn and Rahu being Swa in the 8th house. I mean, that's a pretty kind of tight energy. I mean, this could be like a very alternative mindset. This could also represent like India. I've mentioned when Saturn is in its own sign, that can, because India is a traditional culture, a very strong Saturn, like in Capricorn or Aquarius can indicate Indian related things. But Rahu again will bring like a fixed or even like obsessive energy. So this might be a transition. Um, but again, I don't know. It's like I was getting both. It could be a transition to something better, And at least Mars is swa, so at least Mars is strong. But Mars is aspecting the lugna where it's debilitated. So there's some general instability here, but strength as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag of like, mm, you know, I would say some mental emotional strength, but having some sort of alternative way about it. Um, yeah. um, But again, you keep getting Mars, energy in the fifth house, so it's pretty tough. But I could see this as like how would I say it? It's like somebody who's trying to be strong, I think. But this might be like, kind of a long-term, pretty serious kind of reflection time for somebody, because it looks like they've really been mentally focused, and even like Mercury is with this Mars. So there's a lot of mental and emotional focus, but also like kind of, I'd say like not strength, but like determination, but determination that's resulted in disappointment. So it's like, how do we deal with this? So there is strength here, but it's almost like a strength through like just pushing through, even if what's really needed is maybe like a slight change of direction or a different approach. Like I mentioned in the main chart, like maybe the thing is to switch from like trying to have a biological child to like an adopted child, or maybe surrogate through surrogacy or something like that, um, to fulfill that wish or goal, that kind of thing. But I'm listed here at the bottom here. Again, so far all four charts I've looked at, Mars is on the fifth house. Again, accidents, infections, fifth house matters, of like children. So that keeps coming up. In this chart, I started looking at like relationships. So at the top, the Navamsha D9, it's spouse and partner, spouse-like partnerships, business partnerships. And then below it is the Drake and a D3 for siblings. So in the top chart, Mars is not well placed, and that's the main planetary period. So, you know, but the eighth house at least is, changes and endings. So something's shifting here. There is also a parivartana yoga between Sun and Jupiter. So the spouse here, again, we know that Sun is moving into Aries, which will enliven and, bring energy to the spouse. So again, Sun is strong in this subchart as well. And Jupiter is about, kindness and fairness and stuff like that. So, it's kind of a nice combination having Sun and Jupiter all over the D9 here. Saturn is aspecting its own in the Lugna. That'll bring some strengths. Venus is a karako bhava nasha. Venus is in the seventh house. That'll bring some difficulty with relationships, which again you can see in the main chart because the spouse, Venus is so compromised, and also the Lord of the seventh house is gone 12 houses away. So there can be losses through, again, spouse-like partner, business relationships, independent business, that kind of thing. Saturn is also on the moon here, so that'll bring difficulties potentially to mind and feelings. Yeah, the Drake and a D3 for siblings. Mars is not well placed and it's debilitated. Uh, but is it Nichabanga? Yes, it is Nichabanga because Jupiter's aspecting there and Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. So Mars not only represents siblings, but it represents enemies, and you can see it's in the sixth house here of enemies. So it could be like sibling issues or rivalry. And we were seeing in the main chart that there's problems with the third house. Saturn is also aspecting K2 in the eighth house with the SWA, Mercury, debilitated Venus. This could again be like indications of somebody. So again, you're kind of recreating that pravraya yoga on the Pisces Virgo axis, essentially. Um, so it looks like the siblings as well have a similar kind of MO in terms of um, whatever this is, like there's similar difficulties that the siblings are having, and you can see that Jupiter's debilitated in the 12th house here, so it might be the siblings also have issues like fertility issues, or they might have also lost children in other ways, like through accidents or something like that. So yeah, so it looks like the siblings also, like, because of this lineup of planets in the 8th house of deep psychology, like Mercury, Saturn, Ketu, those three especially are very distant, kind of objective planets. And so it might be the siblings um, are very pragmatic and objective in their thinking. And that's how they either work through life or deal with problems. That could be. And here, more relationships. So the top is the subtamsha D7 for children, and the bottom's dwadashamsha D12 for parents and grandparents. So all the planets are well placed in the D7, which is nice. But again, you can see on the 4-10 axis here, all the planets are essentially lined up. You do have Mars on the 5th house again. That keeps happening. And you have Jupiter in the 5th house. That creates a karako bhavanasha for Jupiter, which can indicate problems with children. And the thing is, Jupiter is the lugnatia for the whole D7 here. So even though at first glance it's like, oh, yay, all the planets are in good houses, when you start looking at it, you're like, well, it's good, but complicated. So, um, so Mars is exalted in the 2nd house, so active speech, a lot of actions, towards family. Again, this could be a lot of um, actions within the family, but also actions to create a family. Could be Um, but Mars aspecting the 5th house with Jupiter's karaka bhavanasha, this could be loss of separation of children. Swa Mercury, debilitated Banga Venus, Moon, Saturn, Sun on the 4-10 axis here. Home, daily activity. Again, this could be like somebody who's like really like all of their actions in the day, their daily actions, they're constantly trying to move in this direction. Um, and also like the 4th house, it's all in the 4th house as well. So that's like happiness, but home as well. Like it looks like there's a lot of obsessive effort to, make this happen despite the difficulties. Dwada Shamsha D12, parents and grandparents, all grahas are well placed. There's a Saturn, there's two parivartanas here. There's a uh, Saturn Jupiter parivartana. That's going to make both Saturn and Jupiter very strong. This could be a lot of like religious background, spiritual, traditional background of the family, leadership as well. Um, oh, actually, not leadership. I was thinking of sun. No, let me remember to remove the leadership word there. Um, but with the strong Saturn and strong Jupiter, this might be like an overbearing or unyielding type of family because they're so traditional. Like, not just religiously, but, like, in what they believe and value is, like, traditional family structures. Maybe because they're fairly, religious or traditional or whatever, maybe that's really influenced the native and has pushed them in the direction of trying to have kids, biological kids, in a certain way, because, non-biological kids are not quite as valued or something like that, could be. But again, you're also gonna get this, focus and even obsessive focus on the family with Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu in the 2nd house. But again, you've got two enemy relationships there. Jupiter is the soul enemy of Venus, and Venus is the soul enemy of Rahu. So there's a lot of fighting as well. Sun is a Jiva Karaka, so there can be issues with father, which we kind of saw in the main chart because Mercury is the lord of the 9th house, and that's in the middle of all that 6th house stuff. There's also parivartana with Mercury and Ketu. Again, there's going to be kind of this distance separating energy. And so Mercury strong, Ketu strong, Saturn strong. So the three like kind of separationist, kind of colder planets are the strongest here. So With Jupiter and Venus in the second house, these are like kind of a family line of people who may speak well or kindly, but their deeper thoughts, feelings, and actions might be more on the cold and rigid side, is what I was seeing here. You know, yeah, could be. Okay, so then on this slide we have wealth shows or subdivisional charts, because again, it looks like there were money, problems as well in the main chart. So at the top, Chaturtamsha D4 for assets. In the middle, Shodashamsha D16 for vehicles, which I don't normally go into, but again, I kept picking up like vehicles because of that compromised Venus and the Lord of the fourth house, Saturn together. Um, and then at the end here, Ekadamsha D11 for income and public support. So at the top here, Saturn, Rahu, Moon, not well placed. And Mars is debilitated, although it's exalted in the Lugna here. Saturn and Rahu in the third house, so changes and endings. Saturn and Jupiter parivartana, restructure of finances. This essentially again recreates the natal chart, in a lot of ways. Because again, you have Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. um, yeah, that was interesting. And then there's a Balavrishta yoga here as well. So there's a lot of churn, I would say, going on here with assets. Then in the second chart here, Shodashamsha D16, Rahu's not well placed and it's debilitated in the third house. Saturn, Venus in the fourth house. So again, vehicle and properties, it's kind of the obvious association there. Two parivartanas in this chart. So Mercury and Mars, and then Jupiter and Sun. So with Mars and Sun, those are the two fire planets all over the chart. I mean, that could literally be fire, like accidents, explosions, or whatever. And Mercury and Jupiter are like, well, Jupiter against children, but Mercury and Jupiter is like news and media. So it just seems like, even though most of these planets, well, except for, well, Jupiter's not well placed, but we're not looking at Jupiter right now. But well, that's the other thing though, is you could think about it that way, is Jupiter's in the sixth house again. Jupiter representing children in the sixth house of, acute accidents, injuries, medical problems. The other thing is when you bring Mars into the second house through parivartana with Mercury, Mars is going to be aspecting the fifth house where it's debilitated. So especially when you have Mars active, that means Mars is going to be debilitated, and that's even more likelihood of some sort of accident or injury with vehicles related to fifth house matters, again, children. So yeah, it seems like it's corroborating with the main chart here. Then the Ekadamsha D11, yeah, income and support. Moon and Mars are not well placed. Mars is with a debilitated Mercury and soul enemy. So again, there can be issues here. Debilitated Lugnatia Saturn with Rahu in the fourth house. Saturn's exalted in the 10th. Especially with these just these planets. I mean, Mars and Saturn and Rahu, these are not fun and light and happy planets. Mars is rebellious. Mars is trying to create some sort of action, is trying to create some new path or, establish some new reality or equilibrium or something to pull out of, all of this mess. But Saturn being debilitated, in the fourth house of happiness and home, there can be a lot of, obsessive changes and like depression, anxiety related to these things. And again, in the main chart, the owner of the 11th house of income was this Gandanta sun in the sixth house. So this, again, if this was a person, surviving person, they may always be constantly worried about money and income, because of unstable finances. But this is somebody like, again, Saturn at least is exalted in the 10th house, so they're going to have some perseverance or endurance, but it just seems like they're just going to be grinding it out. They're just trying to like, grind it out, try to move forward. And again, we have a Balavrishta yoga again, 5 out of 9 planets in negative houses. So, not the best, happiest days for income, but again, with this kind of subchart and the D11, income's probably always an issue. So. no rest for the weary type energy. Then on this slide, we have career and education, which again could be compromised based on the main chart. So on the top here, the D10 dashamsha career, all grahas are well placed. Mars is swa, so that's pretty nice. And but Mars swa in the fourth house, again, this even more so from the main chart was like property and real estate. Because again, the fourth house represents property, and Mars is one of the bhumi karakas, a planet representing property and land. So there you go. And then the other thing is Mars is aspecting the 11th house into its own sign. So that's going to make it strong. And you have Rahu, Saturn, Venus together. This could be again income, clubs, group, society. So again, this could definitely be like somebody getting into like the real estate or land management property or something like that, involving income groups. This could also be what I was thinking was this might be somebody who's involved with like flipping houses or something like that, where they pick up, default mortgage places or like dilapidated places and then they flip them. Because again, that Mars and Pushya, it's like they're nurturing, debilitated Mars, debilitated property. And that's what they do is they like kind of bring it up and then they sell it off for a profit or something like that. The only thing here about that seems pretty good generally, although Rahu will bring some unexpected things. But Mars is aspecting into its debilitation sign of Cancer in the seventh house. So that may mean that, again, there's not a straight path here. The other thing is that could mean that there's some shady partners involved here. And, whether it's the people you're getting the properties from, or maybe it's some other, coworkers or whatever, that part may not be the greatest. Then we have the Sadamsha D24 for education. Mars and Moon are not well placed. Saturn, Rahu, Ketu in the fifth house of advice and children. This could be bad advice. This could be thoughts of quitting. Or taking a leave of absence or something like that. The Lugnatia of Mars is aspecting its own sign. So there's some drive here. I mean, the education chart is being activated. But again, I was just seeing this as like real estate and property management. And again, Mars in the sixth house. So property that's in trouble, or this could be like competition or something like this. Like this could be like the education could be like a real estate license or learning about that and how to buy properties that are on the fringe financially or physically or whatever, and then flipping them or doing whatever and making a profit off of all that. That could be. So, but I don't think this is like traditional education here, so to speak. Yeah, I think that's more of like maybe a certificate or professional, development type education thing that's going on right now. This could be, again, management, but again, it's just Mars is so strong in the Lugna here. I would keep thinking like land and property management. Yeah. Then on this slide, we have spirituality and worship. So at the top, we have the Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality, and then Vimshamsha D20 for formal worship. In the top here, all the grahas are well placed. However, Mars is debilitated in the ninth. This could indicate issues with authority, also a crisis of faith. 4 planets in the Lugna, so this is an important chart. And Mars is the dispositor, so that'll bring instability because Mars is debilitated here. So it could be a bit of a shaky situation here. Also, Venus and Mercury are there with Rahu and Saturn again, so head versus heart. Some kind of unusual or foreign type of personal spiritual practice might be at play here. Yeah, something definitely alternative though. I mean, because again, we have Scorpio rising in this chart, so that, Scorpio, anything, rising charts tend to be, rebellious and maybe a bit kind of secretive or separatist or something like that. Doing their own thing. So it might be a little bit on again, off again, that kind of thing. Yeah. And you can see in contrast that the D5 is a lot stronger than D20. I mean, Saturn, Rahu, Moon not well placed in the D20 here, formal worship. And we have Mars again in the ninth house of authority and religious institutions and stuff like that. So, and Mars is aspecting Rahu and Saturn in the 12th house. So again, losses and enemies um, and also Balarishta yoga, 6 out of 9 planets in negative houses. So if this is a person, they're probably not so much geared towards formal institutional worship, but doing their own thing when and if they can. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Okay, so yeah, there you go. So there you go. Hopefully, that kind of gives you some idea of the energies for this full moon coming up on the 12th. Thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. Again, I always appreciate all your support of my work in the channel. Liking videos and commenting and subscribing, sending in donations. All of it's appreciated. So thank you for that. Again, all of my videos, teaching videos on my concepts playlist, they can be found there. For famous birth charts, I will look at my birth charts archive list 2024 video until I get the 2025 video out, which I'm hoping, fingers crossed, will come out next week. I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartletastro@yahoo.com. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, homeopathy, and naturopathic medicine, so other paradigms of medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. So, as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.